The old farmhouse on Maple Hill had seen better days. Its white paint had long since peeled into soft flakes, and the porch sagged slightly, like tired shoulders carrying too many years. Yet for Eleanor Hayes, that house was a piece of her soul. It was where she had baked birthday cakes for her children, stitched curtains by lamplight, and kissed her husband good night for 40 years. Now, in her 73rd year, Eleanor found herself a guest in the very home she once ruled. Her son Daniel and his wife Monica had moved in to help her out, though sometimes Eleanor wondered who was helping whom. The mornings were still, filled with the smell of coffee and the faint sound of television news from the living room. She tried to stay useful, folding laundry, sweeping the porch, making soup, but her hands weren't as steady as they used to be. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the words that changed everything slipped through the kitchen like a knife. Eleanor had just taken a tray of biscuits from the oven, her favorite recipe, flaky and buttery, just like Harold used to love. She placed them on the counter, proud of herself for still remembering the exact timing. But before she could call the family in, Monica's voice floated in from the doorway, low but sharp. "You eat but don't help." Eleanor froze. The tray trembled slightly in her grasp, and one biscuit tumbled onto the floor. She looked up slowly. Monica was rinsing dishes, her back turned, but Eleanor knew the words were meant for her. Daniel sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up. He didn't defend her. Eleanor bent down, picked up the fallen biscuit, and placed it gently in the trash. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. Later that night, she sat by the window in her small upstairs room, the one that used to be her sewing space. Outside, the bare branches scraped against the glass. The November wind howled, carrying the faint smell of rain. She thought about all the years she'd spent caring for everyone. Daniel's school lunches, Monica's first baby shower, the endless hours spent watching the grandchildren so they could work late. She'd given everything she had, her time, her energy, her love, and now, somehow, she had become a burden. Her husband's voice echoed softly in her mind, as though the house itself remembered him. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small in your own home, Ellie." A single tear slipped down her cheek, landing on the worn wood of the window ledge. For the first time in years, she began to wonder what her life might look like somewhere else, somewhere she could finally breathe again. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. The words, "You eat but don't help," echoed in her mind like a haunting lullaby that refused to fade. She lay awake listening to the rain tapping against the window, tracing the old water stains on the ceiling with her eyes. Every sound of the house, the creak of the pipes, the hum of the refrigerator, reminded her how unwelcome she had become within its walls. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, her mind was made up. There would be no confrontation, no raised voices, no tears. She would do what she had always done, quietly, with dignity. She rose before the others, her movements gentle so as not to wake them. In the dim light of her lamp, she folded her few clothes and placed them neatly in her husband's old suitcase, the brown leather one with scuffed edges. Then, from her bedside drawer, she took out a small photograph of Harold, smiling in his Sunday suit, and slipped it into her pocket. When she came downstairs, the house was still. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. She walked to the kitchen one last time. The biscuit tin sat open on the counter, half full from the day before. She smiled faintly and closed the lid, her fingers lingering on the cool metal. On a scrap of paper torn from her old notebook, she wrote in her delicate cursive, "Don't worry about me. You wanted peace, now you'll have it." Mom, she placed the note on the kitchen table, where she knew Daniel would see it first. Then she took her coat, wrapped her scarf around her neck, and stepped out into the cold Pennsylvania morning. The air was crisp, biting her cheeks as she walked down the gravel path toward the road. The sun had barely risen, and the sky was a pale wash of pink and gray. For a moment, she turned to look back at the house, her home, her memories, her heartbreak. And then she turned away. At the bus stop, a kind-faced driver helped her with her suitcase. "Heading somewhere special, ma'am?" he asked. Eleanor smiled softly. "Just somewhere quiet." She rode in silence, watching the fields and fading barns pass by. Each mile between her and Maple Hill loosened the knot in her chest. Her destination was Briarwood, the small town where she had worked years ago as a school librarian. There, the streets were lined with oak trees, and the bakery still smelled of cinnamon. She knew who she needed to see, Mr. Nolan, the lawyer who had handled her husband's affairs. As the bus slowed near Main Street, Eleanor straightened her coat, her resolve firm. She wasn't just leaving a house behind. She was reclaiming something far greater, her peace, her pride, and the quiet strength she'd forgotten she still had. Eleanor stepped off the bus into Briarwood, the autumn wind carrying the scent of damp leaves and baked bread. It was a small town, familiar yet distant, a place that had once felt like home long before Maple Hill had weighed heavy on her shoulders. She walked slowly down Main Street, her suitcase rolling quietly behind her, until she reached Nolan and Associates, the law office of Mr. Nolan, Harold's old friend and advisor. The bell above the door jingled softly as she entered. The smell of aged paper, polished wood, and faint coffee greeted her. Behind the desk, Mr. Nolan looked up from a stack of files. His eyes widened with recognition. "Mrs. Hayes," he said warmly, standing to shake her hand. "It's been, 10-15 years?" 15, Eleanor replied, her voice calm but firm. "I need your help with something important." They sat in his office, the room lined with bookshelves that smelled of leather and dust. Eleanor laid the suitcase beside her chair and removed Harold's photograph, placing it gently on the desk. "I need to see Harold's original papers," she said. "Everything about the house on Maple Hill and the property deeds, Mr. Nolan nodded, pulling a thick folder from a locked cabinet. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the documents with precision. "Ah," he murmured. "Yes, everything is here, and you do know, of course, that the property, the house, the land, all of it is legally yours." Eleanor's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "I knew," she said softly. "Harold wanted to leave it to me. I never told Daniel or Monica. I didn't want them to feel entitled. Not right after his passing. Mr. Nolan studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful, and now she took a slow breath. "Now I want to sell it." The lawyer hesitated but did not argue. He knew Eleanor well enough to understand the depth of her resolve. Over the next few days, she went through the process quietly, without fanfare. The house that had been taken for granted, the property she had built with Harold's hands and hers, would no longer be in the family's control. The buyers were a young couple, both teachers, full of energy and ideas. They had fallen in love with the old farmhouse, with its creaking floors and weathered charm. "We want to restore it," they said, eyes wide with excitement. Eleanor nodded, feeling a rare lightness in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of justice. Not vengeance that burned, but a quiet balance, the kind that comes when dignity is restored and respect is reclaimed. The house, once a symbol of her burden, was now a testament to her strength. As she signed the final documents, Eleanor glanced once at Harold's photograph. "It's time," she whispered, and for the first time she believed it. Back at Maple Hill, the first hint of the storm Eleanor had quietly brewed came in the form of a crisp, official letter. Daniel tore it open, expecting perhaps a routine notice or a minor administrative form. Instead, the words on the page hit him like cold rain. The house, his home, and all the surrounding property had been sold. He read it again, his fingers trembling. Monica, drying a plate at the counter, noticed the change immediately. "What is it?" she asked, her tone wary. Daniel's voice shook. "The property, Mom sold it. We have 30 days to move." Monica stared at him, disbelief turning to anger. "That's impossible. She can't, but she could, and she had." The weeks that followed were tense and bitter. Furniture was packed hastily, belongings were moved to storage units, and the house, once filled with laughter, smell of biscuits, and warmth, now echoed with regret and silence. Daniel tried to call Elinor, left voice messages full of pleading and apology, but there was no response. Meanwhile, Elinor settled into her new home by Lake Silverpine, a small cottage tucked among wildflowers and whispering reeds. The air was cool, the sun sparkled on the water, and the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore was a lullaby that eased years of hurt. She spent her mornings feeding birds, her afternoons walking along the shoreline, and her evenings writing letters she might never send. One rainy afternoon, a letter arrived from her youngest grandson, Jamie. His handwriting was unsteady but heartfelt, full of innocent remorse. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I miss your pancakes and your stories. Mom and Dad fight a lot. I wish you would come back." Elinor read it carefully, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She picked up her pen and wrote back with the calm clarity that had defined her life. "My dear Jamie, remember, love never asks for rent, but it shouldn't be taken for granted. I will always love you from wherever I am." Grandma, for the first time in months, Elinor felt free. She wasn't angry, nor did she feel the need to explain or justify herself. The quiet revenge of taking back what was hers had been enough. Her dignity remained intact, her spirit untouchable. That evening, she sat in her rocking chair on the porch, Harold's photograph resting on the small table beside her. The sun dipped low over the lake, casting gold and rose across the water. Birds sang in the trees, a gentle wind carried the scent of pine and rain, and Elinor smiled softly, feeling a peace she hadn't known she could have. She had been hurt, she had been underestimated, but she had reclaimed herself, and in that reclamation, she discovered the sweetest revenge, serenity. The house on Maple Hill would stand with new occupants now, full of hope and love. And Elinor, surrounded by the quiet splendor of her new life, finally understood that freedom and dignity were worth more than any family feud, more than any harsh word, and far more than any house ever could be. She closed her eyes as the sun set, and for the first time in years she felt completely, beautifully at home.